Welcome to VPG's Virtual Water Cooler Chat Podcast, a platform that features professionals across a variety of industries and promotes growth mindset principles with a central pillar of championing the achievements of women. Our conversations explore a wide spectrum of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives, creating a vibrant mosaic that enriches our collective understanding and strengthens our commitment to growth and empowerment.
Our guest interviewer is Ella Bump, a litigation assistant at VPG who is currently studying Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering at Johns Hopkins University. Ella is passionate about the intersection of technology and intellectual property and plans to pursue a career in patent law. Today, Ella is speaking with Tiffany Ishihara, a senior program manager at Google specializing in patent prosecution, operations, and matter management. Tiffany's career spans over a decade in patent prosecution. Her expertise encompasses a wide range of initiatives, including program managing the inaugural launch of Google's Legal Summer Institute and launching Google's patent matter management system. She is currently focused on optimizing legal operations and advancing technological solutions in the patent space. Let's get started.
I'm just going to introduce myself really quickly. My name is Ella Bump. I'm a junior at Johns Hopkins. I'm studying Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering, but I'm really interested in going into patent law, which is why I'm working with VPG. I started here about a month ago, so I'm still pretty new, but I'm working as a litigation assistant, and I'm really enjoying just learning a lot about like the intersection between law and tech and all of that sort of thing. So I'm really excited. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, of course. That's super exciting. It's sort of a hard career, I feel like, to find initially. It's like not very well talked about when you're going through school and stuff. So it's cool that like you're already kind of focused on that. So that's awesome to hear.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's another reason why I'm excited to be with VPG and to be doing interviews like this, because even as an undergrad student, like people don't talk about things like legal tech. It's really nice to be able to actually talk to professionals and sort of get an idea of what's going on. Could you just tell me how you met Ashley and got involved with the virtual water cooler chat, how that started?
Yeah, we both do some adapt work together, which adapt I'm sure she's talked about a lot in in this channel. So through that, and then also through sort of the conference kind of cycle. The patent world is small, and especially like the legal ops world is also small. There's kind of a lot of intersection, so bumped into her in a few different ways.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing with us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, I have been at Google, gosh, for I think over 8 years now, which is sounds so wild. But I've focused primarily on legal technology, as you were saying. That's sort of evolved. Well, it's evolved a lot over the time I've been at Google, but I started at a patent prosecution firm. So that's why I'm sort of excited that that's where you want to be, because I spent the beginning of my career specifically as a paralegal at a patent prosecution firm, and that was my first introduction to patent law at all. I mean, that was the kind of area that I got into, not at all knowing about it, what it entailed, what I was going to do. I can go into that a bit more later, but yeah, so that was the start of my career. And then I went to Google right after that and have been there, like I said, for 8 years. Officially as a program manager, what I've kind of grown into is focusing on the tools that we use on the patents team.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that's another area that I'm not as like informed about. So it'll be interesting to learn more through this.
I'm sure. Yeah. It's like, why would you know until you know?
Exactly. So why did you choose to title this podcast episodes Forge Your Path?
Yeah, so I don't think it's unique to me, but my experience at Google specifically has been really figuring out what I want to do kind of on my own, obviously with the help of my colleagues and managers and all of that, but I was really given a lot of autonomy to reach out to different folks and kind of work on different projects, work in different areas, do what we call 20% projects, where you can kind of work on a totally different team or different program for a limited amount of time. And so, because of that, I had a lot of opportunity to really meet a bunch of different people, figure out what I really wanted to do. And like I said, my work, though it in some ways is very similar to what I did 8 years ago, it's also extremely different. And because of that, it was like sort of me forging my own way through the company. I think it's for anybody that wants to do that, that's working at a larger tech company, path is totally open to you. There's typically a lot of opportunity to work on different types of things that, you weren't hired to do necessarily. So yeah, that was what I was thinking because that's been my experience so far.
Yeah, I really like that. Can you tell me a little more about the similarities and differences you mentioned between starting out versus where you are now?
Yeah, so I started out in operations, kind of doing sort of program manager type work, but my expertise was really in patent prosecution when I came in. So that was really more so what I was leaning on, kind of understanding the life cycle of a patent and then being able to go into the weeds with all of our patent attorneys on, certain things that would affect the life of a patent and helping assist with those things like the foreign filings where we're filing each patent, across the world and annuities, things very kind of in the weeds things with patent prosecution. But I kind of stayed in that lane at first, not really expanding up to where I am now, which is more so with the tooling. And that really evolved over time. And I think a lot of that came with changes of management, reorgs, which is sort of like a very common thing at big tech companies. And then, like I said, reaching out and meeting other people and getting to work on different types of projects. One thing I really wanted to do was make the leap to program manager. Google, sort of at large, has a different role profile for what's considered a program manager, which I think is pretty standard across the tech world. And so I wanted to get in that and to get a little bit further away from like the niche operations side. And so I did a few different things. I worked with a few different teams to get some experience actually fully being a program manager. I became PMP certified. And at one point, I actually did take on a different role for a brief period of time that was legal tooling for all of the legal org, not just for patents. And that sort of transitioned me into becoming an official program manager, which was the change I had been wanting to make. I did end up going back. I was offered a management role back on the patents team. So then I went back, but in a different role as a program manager. There's a little bit of semantics there, but also functionally a lot of differences as well. And what I have really come to start focusing on is the tooling that we're using. And so my day to day is focusing on managing our patent management system.
Okay. So what does being a legal tech program manager specifically entail? You mentioned a sort of broader sense of what you're working on. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think if you take a few steps back, many steps back, there's a whole world of legal technology. And especially now with AI, and there's this insane new ability to automate a lot of these legal functions. There's just so many options out there for everything, right? There's a million litigation tools and a million billing tools, and there's more niche things like IP management systems, which is where I sort of live now. Like I said, for a while I was working a little bit broader in our legal org and working with other teams across legal to understand their technology and tooling needs, which was really interesting because that actually gave me the opportunity to understand the landscape and understand what those tools are, like who are the big hitters in the industry, and kind of understand like what are we using versus what are other big companies using versus like what is coming onto the scene. So that was really interesting. And then I got to work on things like RFPs and figuring out how we would go about assessing maybe a build versus buy, because at a larger company, sometimes they want to maybe build an in-house version of that tool, or maybe it's better to just buy it. So understanding again that landscape of what's possible, what's even out there. And then now I'm back in the IP space, specifically patents, and working on our management system that we launched about, gosh, it's like 6 years ago, which I worked on that launch, which kind of was the beginning of me getting my feet wet into that space. And now I'm very deep in our world of that specific management system. And so my day to day is kind of working more on features and new tools within that system and new processes within that system. And so as a program manager, I focus on our sprint cycle and what we're building and the needs across my team, the larger legal team, and then also the company at large, because of course you can't have patents just within the legal team. Like patents require the engineering mind. So touches so many different stakeholders, and it's like a never ending need and never ending machine. So it's awesome because I get to continue to work on these new initiatives constantly, and I get to work with our attorneys, and I also get to work with our developers, and then I'm sort of the hub at times of gathering all of those requirements and actually working with our developers to build those things out and then launch them and then deal with the adoption and all of that. So that's sort of what my day to day has morphed into over time. But throughout the years, I've had this great opportunity of getting exposed to what this legal tech world is all about. It's big and it's small. We all kind of know each other, but also it's ever expanding, especially now with how fast technology is moving.
Yeah, I love that interdisciplinary experience you were talking about. And you said you joined Google 8 years ago, right? So if the launch was 6 years ago, you're able to see like that whole really cool.
Yeah, it's funny too, because back then it was like, oh yeah, well then what happens after we launch? Then we're gonna move on to some other thing. And then fast forward 6 years later, we're still working across other teams, building new features, new full workflows within that tool. So it's really kind of never ending. We're like, okay, like there's gonna be a stopping point, and then somebody else reaches out and they're like, what'll be really cool is like if we could get this sheet into this tool and make it a whole workflow, and then we get excited about that prospect, and then it becomes a whole new thing, and then my year is already mapped out. So it's like never ending.
Yeah. Is there a specific part of your job that's your favorite, or is it more of just an overall enjoyment of seeing the process through?
I really enjoy working with our developers. I think we're in a very lucky position to where we're so niche that the people that we work with have such deep expertise at this point on what we're doing that we work so well together. It's a little bit different than working with the larger corporate engineering where there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of people moving to different projects and newer people coming in. And it's been really fun to work in a space that's so niche that we kind of, you know, have been together for so many years. And it's been nice to really build those relationships and get to work on really cool, very in the weeds things because like we just have gotten that deep. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's really nice. So, sort of on the other side of that question, are there any challenges that you faced within legal tech? And if so, like how did you work through those or overcome those?
Yeah, I think any tech or tooling implementation is, the hardest thing is that adoption and change management aspect. I've worked on some tools where the adoption just wasn't there. It's like you can build the best thing ever, but if you don't have that executive support or, encouragement to actually use it, it's like you can have the best thing ever. You can pay millions of dollars for a tool arbitrarily, but, nobody's going to use it if they don't want to use it. So it's always the human component, really, that's the hardest part. It's getting the users to actually use the tool. I definitely learned that the hard way. I've worked on things even outside of legal. Like I said, I've done things across the company that are totally unrelated. I worked on the implementation of one kind of like CRM tool for another team, and it ended up being really hard because it was a great tool, but people had their ways of doing their things, and they had their own spreadsheets and their own processes, and having all of these stakeholders come together and actually use the tool was very, very challenging because there wasn't anybody saying, oh, you need to use this. This is like what we're moving to now. It was kind of like, yeah, this is great. We have this now. And if you don't have that adoption, it's just totally useless. So I think one thing I really learned from that experience was don't even start with the implementation. Don't even start the project until you know that it's actually a need, that people are going to use it, and that you have champions for that tool. Because if you don't, it's just not going to be successful. The championing process or person is so critical to the success. So making sure you really fully understand that the issue you're trying to solve and what that solution is before starting any engineering on it is so important. And I definitely learned that the hard way. For me, the most challenging part of any tooling implementation or need.
Yeah, that makes sense. That sounds like it could be frustrating for sure.
Yeah, it's a thing that everybody has to figure out because it's so easy to start solving a problem as soon as you have it before you're actually defining the problem.
Right.
And so you get excited and start thinking about all the ways that you could solve this problem and don't consider whether or not that's gonna be utilized in the end. It takes some restraint. Yeah, it's definitely something that is very important to me whenever a new problem lands on my desk.
Is that challenge something that mostly comes with like your new role, or is it something that you saw from even like before Google and like that work?
I think it's specific to tooling, but any any kind of tech implementation, I mean, any change, change management is really challenging. I mean, when I worked at a law firm, that's like law firms by and large can be very old school, and it's like you just kind of do something one way. I think now law firms, there are a lot of cutting edge law firms now that are doing some cool stuff and have legal technology teams, and they're really trying to see what options they have for streamlining their side of the business, and that's really cool. I do wonder about those law firms and the adoption with attorneys because it can, at least in my experience, it can be really challenging to get folks that have been doing things the same way for years, maybe even to start using a new tool or start using a new process, or with AI, start using something that can maybe even just nudge their work a little bit further along, and developing that trust and taking the time in a very busy schedule to learn something that you can't bill your time for. That's hard. And so I think nowadays law firms have probably a lot of challenge with the change management aspect of them trying to modernize. but definitely that's where I'm at in my current job with just the nature of my work. But that's a problem, I think, across the industry. It's a hard thing to tackle, but I think if you can really figure out the value, law firms and the in-house teams can totally get great value from making some changes.
Yeah, that makes sense. My mom is a school teacher, and I remember her telling me a few years ago that when like the state curriculum was changing and then all these teachers were freaking out with like new tech, and I think things like, well, change in general, but especially with technology, it's kind of scary for a lot of people.
Oh yeah, for sure. And teaching is another good example of an industry that's people tend to stay in for years and decades. And so it is really hard when somebody's been doing something for so long one way to get them to try something different.
Yeah, exactly. So if you could go back and change one thing about your career path, would you? And why or why not?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I think my answer potentially has changed over the years. When I first started as a paralegal at a law firm. So I went to a state college, and when I started working in a law firm, everybody there went to really prestige. It was a really small firm, and again, it's like going back to your point of the like intersection of tech and law. It's like these people were so bright. They all went to great schools, and I was like, I really should have maybe went to a better college. And I really carried that with me for a long time, being, having a lot of imposter syndrome around just my colleagues, especially then you go into Google and it's like, oh, everybody went to Harvard or something, and that really sat with me for a long time. And I always sort of said, like, one of my biggest regrets was like not trying to go to a better, quote unquote, better school. But now I feel like it's almost sort of flipped for me because I'm like, wait a second, but my colleagues now are those folks that went to those schools. So I sort of feel like, oh, maybe that was my path, that was their path. And we ended up getting to a similar place, at least in my particular role. And so I was like, maybe actually like for me that made sense. And for the millions of students that also go to state schools, like it shows that we can, be in this position. So in a way it's kind of like flipped, but that was certainly something I carried with me for, I mean, at least a decade. I also had the really unfortunate timing of I graduated college during the 2008 recession. So it was like everybody was either not finding a job or they were just like, I'm just going to go back to school and get my master's right away because there's just nothing to do. So that was the added sort of like nobody had anywhere to go that really clouded that experience, I think, for me and a lot of the people that were in and around my class. So yeah, that kind of interestingly, I think has shifted a little bit, but I still think about it.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. It's like this pressure that you have to go to the best school and the best firm and like do just all the top things to be successful, but that's definitely not true.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because I didn't have that pressure growing up. I didn't come from a family that put that sort of pressure on me. They were like, yeah, you should go to college, but maybe you could go to community college. I came from a very blue collar family, and so I had the very different experience of the folks that came from or felt the pressure either from family or school or wherever that pressure might be coming from. I didn't feel that, and so for a while I looked back on that and I felt bad. Like I was like, oh, I wish that I had that encouragement. But over time, all of that sort of shifts. But it is fun. It's just like totally a perspective thing, the way you are growing up, the pressures you're feeling, and whether or not that's the right thing for you, it sort of comes to light later in life.
No, honestly, I mean, I came from like the reverse situation where my family was very much like, you need to go to Harvard. Like, this is what you need to do. But once I got to undergrad, I'm actually a transfer student, so this is my first year at Hopkins. But before then, I was at a much less well-known school in the Midwest, and I feel like I regret putting that kind of pressure on myself as well. I think
Mm.
just a lot of a lot of learning, a lot of growing up is just going to college or getting that education. It's not necessarily anything to do with the prestige of a school.
Yeah, and it depends on your career, obviously. But yeah, I think it's the grass is always greener. Pros and cons for sure. I feel like I missed out on some experiences, but at the same time, I'm also like, well, hey, it all worked out in the end.
You have colleagues that had different experiences or something you might have wanted to do instead, but you all ended up at the same place, so clearly worked out pretty well.
Yeah, we've all got different journeys.
Yeah, exactly. So, transitioning outside of your work, do you have any hobbies or interests that have influenced your professional life?
In a funny way, maybe this is a unconventional way to answer this question, but in a way, I feel like my hobbies helped with my work-life balance more than anything. So, whereas not necessarily supplementing, what I'm doing at work, one of my biggest hobbies, especially earlier on when I was working in the law firm and also when I started working at Google, I would teach dance at night. And so which I loved, and it was like totally a different escape for me. I had this feeling like when I would teach, that was the only time that my brain was just like fully focused. It was like very meditative in that way of like, I don't have the capacity to think about anything else right now. So this is where my brain is. And it was good. It was good creative juice too, because I did all the choreography for the classes and it took up some mental space that was so different from what I was doing. And it also put me on the schedule of like, okay, well, I ended up only teaching, I think in the later years, I was only teaching like one class a week, but it was enough to be like, okay, on this day, like the laptop's closed, I'm leaving. Now my brain is here. And it was a really nice work-life balance thing for me because it gave me just a really harsh way to like flip that switch off. And I think that really helped because, it's really easy to, especially when you work at a place that serves breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it's really easy to never leave.
Yeah.
So to have this like sort of hard out and something I have to focus on every week was a really nice way to force myself to disconnect and most importantly not burn out.
Yeah, that's really cool. What kind of dance did you teach?
So I taught a cardio class. I stopped unfortunately teaching when the pandemic happened and I just kind of moved on and now have had a baby and stuff. So I'm in a different place now,
Yeah.
but I was doing cardio and then I was also actually dancing for a performance team. So we did a bunch of different styles of dance. So it was like this other big pocket of my life at the time that was just a good way to detach. And it was nothing too serious, mostly just I focused on the fitness aspect of it, obviously, because I was teaching a cardio class. But yeah, it gave me a good chance to do something completely different.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like I hear a lot about legal work as something that's completely time consuming and you don't have much of a life outside of it. So it's nice to hear that you have a good outlet like that.
Yeah, you really got to force yourself for sure, because it's so easy to get sucked in. So I think signing up for a class or doing something. I mean, when I first moved to New York, I signed up for a sewing class. And
Oh,
so it was like once, things were open again, I started doing that. So it was like I'm a person that's like I need to like schedule something. I need to force myself to be somewhere at a certain time weekly in order to really be able to shut it off and live my life outside of the office.
yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Sewing class sounds fun. I feel like that's more of my speed. answer, but I have a lot of admiration for people who do and who are athletic like that.
It was really fun. My husband bought me a sewing machine for, I don't know, like I think maybe my birthday. And I think he also bought me the sewing classes too. So it was like, it was really fun. It was a chance to just do something totally different.
Yeah, that's awesome. So my last question is there any piece of advice or insight you'd like to share with our listeners who might be considering a career in law or tech, or the combination of both, or maybe pursue a career like the one that you have?
So I would definitely say learn about all of the things going on in the tech world right now. There are so many free or low cost classes. I mean, just you honestly just using AI and understanding what the capabilities are. This is something that was not available to us, a decade ago. And now there's so much free information, learning opportunities. I mean, there's this vibe coding, which is now gone viral because you can become a coder by using things like ChatGPT or Gemini because the tools are so powerful. And so now you can do things that you don't even necessarily need the skills or the education for, which, pros and cons. But because it exists, you should learn it. You should understand the landscape and what's possible, what's out there. Take advantage of all of those things because if you're not, somebody else is. And somebody else is going to know going into that interview what those things are, how to use them, what they're capable of. And every job wants you to know those things, know of those things, know what they do. So definitely learn as much as you can, because that was something that, wasn't available to me when I was trying to figure this out. And it's really cool that it's available now so broadly. Take advantage of that stuff, meet people. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff that can be done now.
Yeah. To a certain extent, I'm shocked by how easy it is to just go on ChatGPT and like ask a question and just even act with AI and things like that. I think AI came out like my freshman year of college, and that's what everyone's been talking about ever since. So it's just interesting.
Yeah. And, that's gonna impact the legal field in one way or another, right? I feel like there's a lot of protection in the legal field as far as actual human lawyers needing to conduct legal work. But there's still opportunity for a lot of automation. What that means for junior associates coming in can be, can mean a lot of different things. It could mean the extinction of the job, but more likely than that, it means like, hey, you should learn how to use these things so that you can help assist your own work, help assist your partners. Your partners are probably not going to understand what's going on, not going to want to know what's going on. Like being in law school or being a junior associate and really understanding what that world is, what the capabilities are, maybe what's bad about it. I think we all know the stories that have already happened with misuse of AI in illegal filing and those pitfalls that are going to become bigger and bigger over time. How to avoid them, you really have to educate yourself on all of those potential problems and opportunities in the future.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, thank you so much for being here. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Ella. It was so nice to meet you.
It's really nice to meet you too.